Hello and welcome to Individualists Unite. I am the Radical Individualist, aka Chip, and we are here to have one of our conversations with real people. This real person is Rich. We were going to have a 15-minute conversation that ended up being an hour and a half, give or take. So I've divided this into three individual segments. This one is the first. Before we start this, I would like to remind you that you can go to substack.com, Individualists Unite, and find a whole lot more content. So thank you for listening or watching. Hello, everybody. I am the Radical Individualist, otherwise known as Chip to my friends. This is Individualists Unite, and this is Rich. Hello, Rich.
Hello.
So we are here not to talk about the fate of the world or all the great things that some of these podcasts talk about, but to talk about real people, which is, if we know anything, we know how to be real people. So Rich and I first met as a result of Braver Angels, which is kind of a organization trying to bring Democrats and Republicans into the same room and try to sort out differences.
Yeah, and not, without any violence, you could say.
Without the shouting,
Yeah, right. Without the shouting.
What's the point? I guess if you're not going to shout,
Yeah.
But try to find common ground, try to find out what makes sense, what works, because, getting all striking doesn't work.
All right.
So, tell us about yourself and who you are and how you got here.
Well, I'm a retired nurse. I worked in surgery for many years. And I grew up near Buffalo, New York, and I lived in Cincinnati since 1973. Well, I've been involved in this group here in Cincinnati. Well, it's a nationwide group called Braver Angels. And like Chip said, we have different workshops and gatherings and formal, informal, all kinds of things to have discussions about sometimes controversial issues with people on opposite ends of the spectrum. And the way what interested me about this group, it started in December of 2016. And basically, I didn't think Trump was he didn't have the right qualities to be a good president. And I still feel that way. But on the other hand, I realized half the people in this country voted for Trump. And, I'm sure there's all different kinds of people within that group with different motivations and different, and also some that are probably very good people. I hate to use the term good people, bad people, right? But I think you get my idea of someone who I know some that I respect. I respect their values. I respect the work that they do and so on. And some of my coworkers at the time had voted for Trump. And, these were people I'd worked with for years. So it just seemed like a turning point to me. But anyways, I found out about this Braver Angels group. And my interest was I want to try to understand the point of view of people who voted for Trump, or since then have been what some people call the MAGA right, and so on. Although there's a lot of people that voted for Trump who probably wouldn't fit that description, But
what is that description?
Good idea. I would say the MAGA. I'm even saying it right. MAGA right. I would say are what is known as Trump's base, who are, and this is just coming from, a liberal's opinion here, are very, very dedicated to Trump and will vote for him, you know, no matter what. Where I think there's some people who are maybe on the fence a little bit, and maybe if they are not too unhappy with the Democratic candidate, they might be vote for the Democrat. But I think particularly in 2016, Hillary didn't get a lot of praise or a lot. She didn't convince a lot of people that she'd be a good president, and even on the Democratic side. But I think depending on the circumstances, there's a big group of Trump voters who may switch one way or the other. And I call the MAGA right, or those who are less apt to switch and are less apt to be critical of Trump.
Yeah. But what besides that they support Trump, what's in their heads? What are they trying to make happen? Explain that a little bit.
Okay. I mean, I'm not really good to speak at that, to be honest with you, because I don't know a lot of people within that group. I think, I would characterize them people who are maybe more suspicious of the government, suspicious of institutions, medical field, our judicial system, and our government, just our government as well. And I think a lot of the people in these groups have a agenda other than what they present. And so that is my feeling. Now, that's just an opinion, and I don't have I haven't talked to a lot of that group personally. So, good.
Well, yeah, because we've talked before. I have voted for Trump the second time, not the first time, and I'll vote for him this coming time. Yeah, I think the mistake a lot of people think is that Trump showed up, and then people like me said, "Oh, I love this guy." He showed up and he represented who we already were. We weren't attracted to him. We accepted that he recognized who we are.
Yeah.
And who we are is people who are used to assessing situations. Let's evaluate this. We're not inclined to take a side more than to say, what have we really got here? What are the problems? What are the solutions? And so that's the way Trump speaks to us. Now, as far as speaking, the way he speaks when he gives a speech, he's very strident, but that's not the way he actually runs things, which is obviously important. I don't appreciate any politician getting up there and doing their stump speech and we're the good guys and they're the bad guys. Trump does it. Biden does it in spades.
Right.
They all do it, almost. Not all.
Well, most, yeah.
You're not going to get in the newspaper by being reasonable, unfortunately. So if you say nasty things, that gets the press.
Right.
I stopped having any faith in the media probably in the 1990s. So long before Trump ever said a word, I started noticing all the things that were provably false, deliberately. I mean, anybody will make a mistake of a statement. Okay, but when there's a deliberate effort to mislead by the media, and my basic rule of thumb is if somebody makes a mistake, they make a mistake. But somebody lies to me, we're done.
Right.
From that point on, I don't trust them. I might bother to try to find out if what this particular thing they say is true or not. But why should I go to the trouble? If they're going to treat me like that, I'm pretty much done anyway. So that cuts out a lot of politicians, Democrats or Republicans, newspapers, you name it.
Yeah.
So I say Trump speaks to people like me who feel that way about it. And after all, when he ran for office, when he first showed up in 2015, of course, I said showed up, everybody knew who he was, but he showed up to run for president. People didn't hate him. He was known then as boisterous and so forth, but, so were a lot of people. And then when he started actually getting a foothold into the race and started looking like he was a contender, then here it just came from all over the place. We got to get this guy.
Yeah.
And that just made me appreciate him more.
Yeah.
And certainly dislike the other people more who were doing that.
Could I ask you something? Were you surprised at the level of support that he had in 2016? Or
you got to understand, he is an anomaly in politics because he's not really a politician. Who in politics isn't a politician? Democrat or Republican? He's not a politician. He's better at it than the politicians, and I get a kick out of that. So to answer your question, was I surprised? Like anybody, I thought, is this another stunt? Is he just looking for press, having a good time, sell a book, something? So I didn't immediately take him particularly seriously. I didn't vote for him. I voted for the Libertarian candidate. No way in hell I was going to vote for Hillary anyway. But I was then, and I'm appalled now at the viciousness of the political left. They just pulled out all the stops. I've never seen politics as something you expect a whole lot of ethics or principle. I've never seen anything like this.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as I'm concerned, I don't think it's just a matter of how I'm concerned. It's a matter of fact, we are now a banana republic, which was never been before.
Right.
The opposition is being arrested and persecuted and harassed as a means to try to get them out of the picture. And who does that? Totalitarians, tyrants.
Right.
That's the only way I can see it.
Yeah. I just want to go back a step or two.
Yeah.
When I asked you, were you surprised? Because the mainstream media and me and I don't know, probably the majority of the country was very much surprised. I certainly was. I can't speak for everybody else. At the level of, support that he got. And I remember reading, during the primaries in 2016, early on, Trump was doing pretty well, but I read, an editorial from a guy who's, really well thought of, pundit, you might say. And he says, he's doing okay now, but with all these candidates in, but he'll never get more than 20% of the vote for the Republican primary. Well, he got 50% of the vote of the whole country, and I was like, and a lot of us on the left were like, wow. And I think, the media, as far as, the media, a lot of the media, mainstream media, leans left. And, they have even in their news articles, they often, and the right does this as well, but the right media, or media on the right, they have a way of, setting the story, what they leave in, what they emphasize and don't emphasize, to sort of, make it lean, give you a view of what happened that is more on the left or on the right. And I think, I said I saw the MAGA right as, folks were suspicious of government and our institutions. So I don't think you should blindly believe the media or the government or, experts, necessary things like that. but I think I'm less apt to disbelieve them, and and be more open. I think my
cut in there.
yeah, sure.
You're less apt to disbelieve the left media. Is that what you mean?
The main, well, what you call the mainstream media, which is primarily left. I mean, the New York Times, which I don't have a subscription now, but I used to and would read it. Their editorial, there you have a whole group of editorialists who write, and I'll give them credit. They have, I think, 2 or 3 now that I personally would call conservative. But they're sort of, to the moderate end of the conservative level.
They say they're conservative. Do any of them support Trump?
I do not know. And I doubt if the New York Times would hire anybody, that supports Trump. But on the other hand, I mean, so when I read articles, I don't, blindly say, oh, this must be true. But I just personally find, that I tend to believe mainstream media is more reliable, more credible than some of the sites on the right, which I admit I don't spend a lot of time reading those outlets. I guess it's limited.
I'm seeing your bias there because I see. There you go, and so am I.
Oh,
but I see it entirely the other way.
Yeah.
And for what it's worth, I gave up on mainstream media, like I said, in the '90s. So just forget about Trump. Like I said, if I feel like I'm being manipulated,
right.
And it's like, okay, are you manipulating me? No, you're expressing your opinion, honestly. Okay?
Right.
You're not trying to say things are factual when they're just your opinion. So that's a whole other thing. But the media has really done horrible things. Hands up, don't shoot. Didn't happen.
Yes, I agree.
Not happen.
And I agree with you that was bad. I mean, that was a mark against the mainstream media.
But they didn't make a mistake with that. It went on for years. Nick Sandmann from across the river here, it was just pilloried for standing there and saying nothing.
Right. But it's come out in the mainstream media. I've read both that, it wasn't like it was first, portrayed with hands up, and he put his hands up, that didn't happen. And that, the federal government under the Judiciary Department under Obama, I think, looked at the case, and this was in the news at the time, and decided not to prosecute on a federal level.
Absolutely true.
So that makes me think, well, they're not just riding somebody, into prison without having.
Yes, and the officer was ever charged, I believe.
Right. So, I mean, it didn't.
But Barack Obama himself had a few things to say politically. Churn thing. He pretty much started the riots, as far as I'm concerned. But no, can't think of the Attorney General. I should.
I know who you mean.
But I
can't think of him either.
I do silly things like actually read the findings straight from the horse's mouth,
Yeah.
And I read it, and it's very descriptive and specific, and says that Michael Brown brought it on himself. The officer had he left the officer no choice but to shoot.
Right.
So you read that in the findings of the Attorney General. You don't read it in the paper at all. They never said that. I don't think any newspaper at all ever did more than give it a little quick glance at, they didn't charge her because they say something different than what we all want to believe. Hands up, don't shoot,
Yeah. Well, I got that. I don't know how long after the actual event took place, but I got the news that it wasn't like it was first portrayed. And and the federal government chose not to prosecute, and and that it was misrepresented by the mainstream press.
Mhm.
So maybe somebody who isn't a news nut like I am on the left might have never got the message.
I'm sure they didn't. That's my point.
Yeah.
And I just had the thought, I've had it before, but then you kind of reminded me, we were talking about the federal government decided not to prosecute. Why would they even be involved in it? This was a police shooting, for better or worse. That's more of a state function, there's no reason for the federal government to be in there at all anyway. And now it's just routine for the Department of Justice, the Attorney General for the United States, to get into things that are essentially local matters. It just totally goes beyond the constitutional limitations of the federal government, which are all but ignored anymore by both parties. So there you go.
Okay.
So, and we got into all this and we can get into it some more, but we weren't going to talk about us. Remember?
Okay.
And I had the thought, things change and things stay the same. How long were you an actual practicing nurse?
I sort of knocked around. I started to college after high school. I dropped out. I started back. I dropped out. And eventually got a job as an orderly at Deaconess Hospital. And from there, and I was an orderly in the surgery department. And I would go get the patients on the floor and so on. And sometimes they call me in the surgery room to, hold this up or, something like that. And I just liked the atmosphere. I liked that there was a team effort, all working on one thing. And as I got into nursing later, I found out, I really liked working on one patient at a time, where I had some experience with nursing on the floor, and you were, had 6 patients or, and you were sort of stretched sort of thin. Well, anyway, so I was an orderly. I went to Cincinnati State for a 1-year program at that time. Now it's a 2-year program. And this has been a few years ago that I went. And I became a surgical tech, did that for a couple of years, and then went back and got my nursing degree, associate's degree. It was a 2-year program at Miami Middletown. And but I always worked in surgery. So, and then once I became a nurse, it was probably like 32 years or so working as a nurse in surgery.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay, well, I guess around 40 years total in the career? Or?
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because the reason I ask, besides it's interesting, is I think obviously computers have changed a bit in 40 years, but I know a lot has changed about medical care in 40 years. I was curious if you had any thoughts about how much better it is, which it certainly is, of how much has changed, the atmosphere or whatever.
Yeah. Well, one thing that reminds me about, it changing. This has been, 4 or 5 years before I retired. It was one of the last things in the hospital to change we changed from writing hand, the surgical, report and surgical, papers that we filled out were all by hand. And then we went to computers, and there was a special program for, our for surgery and so on. And it was like chaos for a few months, or probably not a few months, but we thought, oh, this is supposed to speed us up, but it's slowing things down. But once we got used to it, we wouldn't want to go back. It had so many benefits. It used to be, I can go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask that going to computers, was it better for the patients as far as people being coordinated and understanding, no screw up, less screw ups? for the patient's sake that he was getting the treatment they should get?
I would say overall, it made better, but it made it better for the patients overall. A lot of it was access to it. One time, well, when I first started, and for most of my career, actually, there was a chart for the patient. And it was this big binder with, the longer the patient had been there, it's big, fat, hundreds of pages and stuff. And if I was, say, had the chart in surgery with a patient and X-ray was going to see him next, or back on the floor, the doctor that saw him in the hospital had come and wanted to write some orders, on the chart. You had to track down the chart. It was like just that one thing. And with the computers, 10 people could see the chart at the same time.
And now you wear your computer, so you don't have to go to a computer. You got it.
Yeah. So, yeah. And so it was that made so much difference. And then we used to, in certain surgeries, sometimes orthopedic and so on, the doc would be working and he'd want to have an X-ray of how it looked, was it aligned right and everything. And so we would call X-ray. 10 or 15 minutes later, X-ray would come. They'd take an X-ray. 10 or 15 minutes later, the X-ray tech would be running, out of breath into the room, and he'd put it up on the X-ray screen there, and the doc would look at it. And then he might say, "Wait a minute, this wasn't aligned right. Take another." Well, the way it is now, you take an X-ray, it instantly goes up on the screen, and the doc can work. He'll like be holding the arm, say, and they're working on his shoulder. He'll take one X-ray, and and he'll move the arm a little bit. Take another one. Take 5 or 6 X-rays all at once, so he can see it from all different angles. And it's a real benefit to the patient not to lie there for 20 minutes or 30 minutes while you're just waiting.
Yeah.
Because a time under anesthesia really predicts a lot of problems. The longer you're under anesthesia, the more apt there's to be some complications and problems. So that's one way I can think of it. I'm sure there's many. Yeah.
And then while you say that, I was going to point out, organ transplants now, which when we were younger, they didn't happen. Artificial joints didn't exist.
Yeah.
And I wonder, as you speak of X-rays, could they have, even if they had the actual artificial joints 40 years ago, could they have put them in without the modern X-ray techniques and all this other stuff they've got?
Yeah, right. Yeah, they have, in some procedures, probably not. Or it was much more simple back then. They did do total hips and total knees and stuff back then, but they would just do it pretty much by feel and everything. And sometimes it wasn't such a good job, but they couldn't fix it, or they didn't realize till afterwards, and so the poor guy with a total hip was sort of limping all his life. His pain was up, but they didn't get everything lined up right.
Yeah.
And now they can do that because they've got a guy from X-ray department in there for the whole case.
Yeah.
And he'll work a little bit and say, "Show me an X-ray of that," and he'll work a little bit more. "Show me an X-ray." It's just continuous. And that wasn't practical back then. I think sometimes the docs would do a total hip, and when they were done, they didn't start closing yet, but when they were done, they would come in and take an X-ray. And but it was basically like it would be hard to go back and totally redo it if they weren't. So they were just hoping it was in the bounds of being okay.
Yeah.
And they just want to check if something isn't totally off, you know. But they weren't apt to go back and redo it. But then they can be readjusting continuously through the whole case.
I get that because I'm not a surgeon or anything to do with healthcare, but similar things where knowing real time what the hell's going on is hugely important. So, and I had the thought, someone I know is about to have some pretty serious surgery. I don't want to say too much and reveal people, but the surgeon knows, and they had a lot of looking to do, but they had CAT scans, MRIs, whatever. When he cuts into it, he already knows what he's going to find. 40 years ago. No. I remember they used to use the term exploratory surgery, which I know they still do somewhat. But there would be things wrong with people. Well, you don't know what's wrong. X-ray's going to show you. We're just going to have to mope them up.
Right.
What's going on in there? But this surgery that I'm talking about is going to be very tricky. And he's going to go in already knowing what he's going to have to do. That's a whole different thing.
Yeah. Like you say, technology has really advanced a lot of things. Imaging is what they've done with imaging with CAT scans, and there's a couple other kind of scans, magnetic resonance scan, and so on. Is a huge advance. They can advance. They have these stents and other things inside the heart that they can fix. By sending a little tube up through the main vein, I think, or artery. I'm not that sure. But and then they send it into the heart, and they can see it going into the heart the whole way on X-ray, and then they can put like a little stent in this artery. Well, that would be on the outside of the heart. It's amazing. Before you'd have to cut them. A big. Open
up the sternum.
And that in itself, beyond whether they fix it or not, is a huge risk factor and very painful, long, time to recover from. And if you're older, a big surgery like that really sets you back. And so your quality of life after that, even if they fix the thing in the heart, may be less. You might never get back to what you were.
And speaking of older, because I will say this about my mother, who in her 80s discovered that she had a benign brain tumor. She was having issues with trying to write. Funny things, she would forget words that were obvious, but she could talk all right otherwise. So my older sister, it's your mother, she handled everything all the time. You think, you assume she'll handle everything forever. But my sister said, hey, wait a minute, something's wrong. And it turned out this benign tumor was just crowding her brain and inhibiting function. And the surgeon said, well, we can remove this, obviously put you in surgery, open up your skull, yada, yada. You're as old as you are, you might not recover. And it might not do you that much good. And my mother was looking at how much longer am I going to live anyway? So her one question is, will I be in pain? I said, no. She said, then never mind. But the point is, he could tell her exactly what was wrong with a CAT scan or MRI. I'm not sure what he did. He could give her chapter and verse of what her issue was, so she could make an informed decision.
In the past, they might have said, well, you have the symptom. Well, if he was honest, he might say, we have the symptom. We have no idea what's wrong. But let's look inside and see if we can figure it out.